works every day. In these times, you got to be wise. Don't stand around and criticize. Just give love on Christmas Day. Give love.
This is a great institution that will be observing 50 years of existence come December 2025. And indeed, that is a feat to be proud of. Tonight, we gather for a town hall meeting to chart the way forward to tackling the crime epidemic, which continues to sully our name, especially when it comes to murders. This year, we are already at 44. Last year, we had a record 55. This has got to stop. But this meeting is not just about murders, it is about crime. And we have a panel of very learned people, intelligent people, people who can educate and edify and give us an idea as to how we can quell what is going on and how we can chart our course without this amount of criminal activity in our country. I wish to apologize for the absence of our chairman, Daniel Cummins, and I'm sitting in for him at this time. He should be joining us later. At this time, I'd like to invite our hostess for this evening, Miss Danielle Vera, to take the rest of the evening with you. Thank you very much.
Good night. Thank you, Mrs. Felix. Protocol already established. We can begin our discussions for this evening. Our first address will be made by none other than the President of the New Democratic Party, Honorable Dr. Godwin Friday. He will be giving an overview of crime in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for those of you who are here in the hall with us. I want to thank the members and those who are listening beyond the confines of this room. I want to thank also the panelists for accepting our invitation to be here tonight. This is not the first event that we have had concerning the very serious problem of crime in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I recall a few years ago when the number of homicides had spiked up to about 37. We convened here at this hall and decided that we would take the dramatic step and we were going to walk the country just as a measure of indicating there is something abnormal, something different, something extraordinarily wrong that is happening in our country. So we walked from Fitzhugh to Kingstown, a little bit of riding through Garden Yard there. And then the following week we went from Rebecca to Kingstown, 8.5 hours. And the point was to dramatize the fact that crime in our country has gone well beyond what not as acceptable, but what we tolerate in a free and democratic society. And so we sought to dramatize that. Nothing, of course, different was done by the government. They continue to pretend that there was no real crisis in our country. But we must all agree that the most pressing, one of the most pressing problems that we have confronting our country is that of the epidemic of crime that is sweeping all over St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Of course, everyone is affected because it affects us in terms of how we perceive our own security and safety. But the families of those persons who are killed, those persons who are violated in other ways, they feel it most of all. Murder, of course, is the most extreme of crimes. It's the one that gets the attention. And the last 2 years, we have had record-breaking numbers of homicides in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Last year, there were 55 homicides in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a country of, well, we don't know what the population is now, but it's certainly under 110,000 people. This year, we have 44 thus far. And the troubling thing is that most of these are violent crimes committed by killings by gunshot, and the way in which that they occur is not simply a situation where people lose control in a violent situation. They seem to be planned and deliberate and executed in ways that shock the conscience of our nation. It is true to say that this ULP government has overseen the worst period of criminal violence in our history. And I challenge anyone to look elsewhere to see if the situation was worse. It is not just the sheer numbers, but how the killings are done. Mainly, as I said, by gunshot, involving young people, committed in broad daylight, multiple victims in a single incident, and it goes on and seems to get worse as the years pass. Instead of addressing the problem, the government doesn't seem to be concerned. They fail to appreciate the gravity of the problem. And we know that tackling it requires difficult choices. We have called on the government to have a broad-based approach involving all stakeholders in the society, because this is a problem that transcends partisan politics. But of course, those calls are never heeded by this present administration, because they seem to think that everything can be exploited for partisan political gain. We continue to make that call. They're saying that when the rain falls, it won't fall on one man's house top. Criminal offenses affect everybody. They touch every household. There are people in this room, myself included, who are family members who have been either killed or in other ways violated. And so this is something that we need to address urgently. Of course, we know what some of the underlying causes are. High unemployment in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In 2022, the youth unemployment rate was put at 41%. 4 out of 10 young people between the ages of 15 and 24 unemployed. It's the highest in the OECS. We know also that over the past decade and a bit and a half, that poverty has grown in this country despite all of the promises and grand statements of the present administration. That their own figures from the study that they conducted, at least that they started and terminated when the results didn't suit their narrative, that poverty increased from 30% in 2008 to 36% in 2018. And this is at a time when we say that they say that they had the most progressive government in the history of this country. What's more is that the poorest of the poor, the indigent, poverty went from 3% to 11%. Some places in the country, poverty exploded. In my own community, it doubled. In Barely, it went to, in some areas, at 66%. In some places, one constituency, it actually went down. And guess which one that was during that period? It was in North Central Windward, the Prime Minister's constituency. The government tries to cover up the shameful condition of poverty and to find real solutions to what we all experience. The other underlying problem, of course, we talk about unemployment, we talk about growing poverty, but there's also the failing school system that results for very high dropout rates. in the secondary school system so that a lot of our young people, they come out into the world with very few skills and limited prospects for productive employment and a productive life. So the temptation to go the more dangerous and sometimes some people think the easy and flashy route is appealing to far too many of our young people. So never mind all the talk here about education revolution and so forth. Look at the dropout rates in secondary school and you will see that it is shocking. There are more effective ways, of course, for dealing with the crime situation in the country. We tried earlier this year to again dramatize the problem, to say, listen, let's stop and take notice of the situation. We put up a billboard that says 55 or 53 homicides in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And some people actually criticize the messenger, that is to say, the New Democratic Party and the billboard, for stating something that is a fact and failing to recognize that the first step to dealing with a serious problem is recognizing that you have a problem. So the billboard said this, and there were some who said, oh, you know, you're washing your dirty linen in public, or you're jeopardizing Sanders and all this nonsense. If we continue with the situation that we are now, where the homicide rate in this country, where murders continue to climb, and they are the most, as I say, they get the most attention, then it jeopardizes the country in ways that those of us who are living here already experience, but for those who may come as visitors, may find that it is not worth their risks. So we need to highlight the problem now and to continue to look for solutions. I mean, a couple of years ago, I made in 2022 a statement which is relevant today. And that is to say that we have to look at crime, the solutions, starting with crime prevention. The old saying that an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure is still true. And years ago, we put forward the social and redemption charter, that the spiritual and social redemption charter that the New Democratic Party put forward. And what that essentially did is a very common sense approach. It says, listen, there are these social groups that we have used in the past that can perform a constructive role and that can be very cost effective in helping young people to develop high proper self-esteem, to steer them into productive and constructive activities. Let us invest in them. And of course, that motion was brought to the parliament and never debated, because this government, they didn't want to deal with the problem as it was identified by us and to be seen to be participating in any measure that the opposition put forward. Again, we do this to our peril. We have to restore trust and confidence in the police and the criminal justice system. It can't be one system for some, you know, that somebody gets involved in an offense and because they're highly connected, you hear nothing of it, or that it is dismissed with a no case submission in the court because evidence isn't presented. We know these things happen. So people see this and they say, well, we can't really trust the system, or they feel that they can do likewise. And so what happens is that the criminal justice system becomes undermined and it doesn't function to protect us in the way that it should. Of course, we also have to rebuild the trust in the police. The police service, they can't function on their own. They have to have support from the community. But it's a two-way street. The police can't come and do the policing as though they are the law. And they are above the law. And that is to say, the police in a way to suggest that they can break the law in trying to enforce it, but nobody else ought to do so. That is something that it erodes trust between the community and the police service. And then when the police go to the people now to ask for assistance, they don't get it. And for other reasons as well. So that is a very serious problem. So we have to invest heavily, and the police service, they recognize this and they talk about it, but it doesn't actually translate on the ground into community policing. How do you get the police to form bonds with the community in such a way that there is that relationship of trust where the police can then rely on their advice and their words to certain people in the community who are going the wrong way, and then that's enough as a correction rather than as a challenge to that particular individual to see how far they can go, in spite of what the police officer says to them. Currently, that situation of trust is completely eroded, and it will not be reconstructed in the present way in which the police functions today. We need also to have a well-resourced and well-equipped criminal justice system. I mean, we can go into details about specific things, but one of the things that I believe that we really need to focus on is relying on more forensic evidence rather than just simply trying to get a confession out of a particular individual as they come to court. The confession is either thrown out or they change their their minds, or they feel intimidated because once they become a witness or they present evidence to the police, they're not sure it's going to be protected, and that they become themselves a target. That is a very serious problem for prosecuting offenses. And so we have a situation now where, and I'm being here very conservative because the last figure I saw that was published in, I think it was in Eyewitness News, was that about 72% of the homicides over the past 10 years were unsolved. You know, that is astonishing. But let us say it's only half. No. You are saying that and when I say offenses, I'm talking homicides more serious. If you have some, a situation where fewer than half of the homicides that are committed in this country are ever detected, prosecuted, and convicted, then essentially you are giving license to persons to engage in this sort of activity. It's a very serious indictment on our criminal justice system and needs to be addressed. And it has to start from the training of the police officers, but also at the level, the type of equipment and resources that are put at their disposal. And of course, what I've specified here, identified, is the need for more concerted use of forensic techniques in order to investigate crimes and to bring evidence to court to prosecute. And the defense lawyers can't be the ones who are becoming the most sophisticated and staying ahead of the prosecution, because otherwise what happens is that, the prosecutors continue to fail and the rest of us continue to feel unsafe in our communities. Of course, our system depends on having both parts, the defense attorneys and the prosecution service. And when they both function equally, then we have a better outcome. But as it is now, it seems to me that if you have more than half of the offenses, that is, the homicides, are not prosecuted, are not detected, or nobody is charged, or nobody is convicted, then that is a serious indictment on the system as it is now. Of course, one of the things that we, and I know we have other speakers, so I'll be brief on this point, but once you have detected someone, you have incarcerated somebody. We have a tendency in our society to say, well, listen, we throw a kid at them, throw a book at them, so to speak. There is very little tolerance for rehabilitation and for helping people, especially young people, to use that opportunity as one to turn their life around, second chances. And it's something that we do not just as adherents to our religion, as Christian brothers and sisters, but we do it because it's in our own self-interest. Rehabilitation is proven to work. It is the more effective way of preventing persons from becoming hardened criminals and career criminals and continuing to be a danger and a risk to society. So we need to invest more in rehabilitation and have a plan for diversion of young persons away from the hardened criminal system to one where they have a second chance in order to turn their life around. This is an investment that is, as I say, it's not just a matter, it's not coddling the criminal, it is not rewarding them for the criminal conduct. It is us protecting ourselves from somebody who becomes a professional criminal and has a lifelong career that essentially endangers all of us. So it's in our self-interest to invest in those kinds of things. Of course, there are so many other things that the police service will tell you that they need to have: better police stations, mobile police stations, having police in areas of hotspots where there are criminal offenses being committed regularly. All of these things need to be done, but we have to do it as a comprehensive strategy, not just simply come out and say, well, this is the new talking point today. We're going to do it because it appeals to a certain segment of the population and appeases some, but the results don't come. Of course, we have all kinds of other problems that I'm sure my colleagues will speak of. Domestic violence is a big problem in our country. Huge problem. Sexual violence offenses against young women and girls. These are things that are St. Vincent and the Grenadines has one of the highest incidents of it. And my colleague here knows more about it than I do. But it's something that we need to address as a serious social problem. Now, I'll end by saying this. Crime and criminal activity, what's the problems that we have now with the increasing homicides in the country. This is a social problem. It is not something handed down to us. This is not our fate. It is something that has emerged over time. I had one prepare a graph. This is a graph. I wish we could have actually put it up here. This is a bar chart that shows the homicides in this country over the past 20 years, 21 years, in 2002. And you will see that in 2023, well, 2020, there were 20 homicides, 2002. In 2023, there were 2003, there were 11. Let's jump ahead. In 2016, well, 2015 is when the persistent high levels started. In 2015, in 2007, there were 36, and then it went back down to the normal levels in the 20s. But then 2015, there was 37 in 2015. And since then, it has stayed above 30, except for 1 year, 2019, which, as we know, that was the COVID year. So we've had in 2015, 37 homicides, in 2016, 40, and then, of course, more recently, in 2022, 42, in 2023, 55, and then this year is 44. So there's a chronically high level of homicides that is being registered now. So it tells me that our new normal is becoming somewhere above 40, and we can't accept that. It's just simply, you look St. Vincent and the Grenadines with other countries that were 10 times our population and have fewer homicides. So it tells me that it's a social problem, something we're doing wrong and we need to correct. And finally, I just wish to shout out to the farmers that we haven't forgot you. We're talking here about crime and violence. Predial larceny is one of the most widespread problems we have in this country. It cripples the farmers, it cripples the farming industry, it creates real hardship for people. And that's what I will say for it now. Hopefully it'll come up more in the discussion. But I just want to acknowledge, at least to say, use this platform to say for what the farmers have been telling me, is that they have no recourse, absolutely, for this problem. They can't go to the police because there is no attention being given to it. They are fed up. They don't go to the police anymore. They just bear the grinds. They hope that the people will come, they will take some here and take some there and leave enough for them to make it worthwhile for them to continue to produce. And that's a very serious problem. For our economy, it's a very serious problem. For those particular individuals, a serious problem for social justice in our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Friday, for a quite an informative address. Our next panelist will discuss, he will focus on criminology. He is a graduate from the University of the West Indies with a Bachelor of Science in Criminology and Criminal Justice. He is also the NDP candidate for North Central Windward. Please welcome Mr. Chieftain Neptune.
A pleasant good night to everyone that is present here in the audience. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the listening and viewing audience. across all media platforms. I want to say a special thank you to the Deputy Chair, Mrs. Velox, and the moderator, Mrs. Danielle Vera, who is my bestie. Now, I want to put what I'm about to say into context. I want you to see from the lens from which I'm looking through. So, as a criminology, when you ask what is crime, we will say crime is an intentional act or omission in violation of criminal law. It is committed without defense or justification. It's sanctioned by the state as a felony or misdemeanor. And I say that to say, when I left Trinidad to come back to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I want a St. Vincent and the Grenadines that reflect St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I want the crime, the law that is in place must be reflective of our land. We live here, so we know what we want in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We know what makes us happy. So whatever we do, whatever amendment of the law, it must be a reflection of our society. Over the past 2 decades, St. Vincent would have seen and experienced an increase in crime. And we all know crime negatively impacts our communities, local businesses, and countries' ability to continue attract foreign investors. The statistics would show that there is a symbiotic relationship between crime, a country's productivity, and quality of life. Crime must therefore be eradicated by all means necessary. And we must do so if St. Vincent and the Grenadines is to remain the jewel of the Caribbean. Past and present administration of St. Vincent and the Grenadines would have taken a more reactive approach in treating crime. The emphasis was placed on detection, legal action, and punitive measures. But we, as the New Democratic Party, propose to utilize a more proactive and contemporary approach to managing crime. The focus would be on deterrence, prevention, prosecution, and rehabilitation. We must tackle the orientation and training of the police training center. In so being, we must incorporate customer service, conflict resolution, rehabilitation training in the police academy, because we want to rebuild the bridge between civilians and police. The police must regain the trust of the citizens. There should be a budgetary provision for the training programs. We will offer refresher trainings for these police and further build the capacity and ensure effective succession planning for the police recruits and for the hierarchies of the police organization, the police force. In keeping, now, as I said, it's more a preventative measure from my behalf. So in keeping with that, we must come up with the concept of community policing. And we propose to introduce or reintroduce adult groups, youth groups within the communities. This initiative will serve to foster again the relationship between the police and the community. As we are having here today, we should have more town hall meetings to help discuss with other stakeholders in the communities how we can prevent crimes, what measures should we take, what are the challenges that are being faced by these communities, and together we will propose solutions, come up with solutions. These initiatives should also, we should also be joined by the police service. I was also a police officer. They say once a police, you're always a police. You understand? So the police should be an integral part of these town hall meetings. We should offer skills training, computer technology entrepreneurships, parenting self-defense, sports, behavioral skills, social development, and life coaching skills. These are activities that will bring a community closer together and the interaction between, again, police and the community. They will bring them closer together. I can't talk enough about rebuilding the bridge between the community and the police. We are seeing murders today that are not being solved. And one might think these criminals, they evolve more now than ever before. They are clever, but I'm saying if we build the trust between the community and the police, we will see some of these cases being solved quickly. They say where there's bush, there's people. But because the civilians, the communities don't have the trust of the police, they are fearful to go to the police to report any crime. So the New Democratic Party will facilitate the reintroduction of police involvement into schools. We will increase police presence and participation. We will present lecturers and presentation which align with the school's curriculum and identify the needs. The key to crime prevention is gaining the trust and support of the public and making the community members active and participants in the process. We all share this responsibility for crime prevention, and in tandem, the police must execute their job with accountability and justice and transparency. The position of the NDP is zero tolerance to crime. We propose strategies that will prove that crime can be effectively managed and eventually eradicated. We do not intend to disregard the rights of individuals in combating crime, but to implement framework that build pillars of prevention, justice, prosecution, and rehabilitations. Now, in most studies, there are four common denominators, if you want to say so. Poverty, unemployment and underemployment, income, low incomes, lack of readiness of citizens, and report incidents of crime. You would see that we in the New Democratic Party had already taken an approach, a holistic approach, in combating crimes in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And our 5 priorities for a brighter future is part of that approach, where poverty is concerned. We created 4 pillars that we know would enhance the lives and livelihoods and eradicate poverty in our country. That will also go for unemployment and underemployment. Now, Dr. Friday would have speak to the Social Redemption Charter. My good friend and colleague, Major, would have done his studies. And I came up with my research, a 20-point plan for the improvement of safety and security in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. There will be overlapping strategies, but we have to know how to marry them together and come up with the best strategy to combat crime here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I will just read out some of my 20-point plans. 1, the implementation of Crime Stoppers program. This is school programs, proactive conservation with students and school staff and this sort of stuff, community-based activities, poverty reduction, more so in the vulnerable communities, increased social programs, creation of youth camps, etc., creation of multiple streams program, strengthening the capacity of the creation of the police youth club, crime prevention through environmental designs, creation of studies in innovation and enhance the capacity of our residents, youth entrepreneurships, strengthening of the security apparatus, implementation of youth service programs, strengthening the police capacity through training, community police beautification programs, remedial education, school training, community policing, the labeling of stigmatized communities, bringing back neighborhood watch, focus on crime prevention, media engagement with security forces, and crime awareness programs in conjunction with the media. Those are some of my points.
We are listening to
So
a town hall meeting down at the
as I wrap up,
Sturgeon's Mitchell Auditorium in Kingstown. How to tackle crime epidemic.
What I will urge the public more, and I'm hoping that we are not desensitized to crime. I'm hoping and I'm fearful that we get to that stage where crime is a normal part of our society. And I said before, whatever we do must be a reflection of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It must enhance. We must make the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines safe. It must not be a case where, as the Prime Minister would have stated sometime, we know who are committing the crime and where they are being committed. I'm saying that no part of St. Vincent we should have more crime than others. We should look to eliminate crime throughout the length and breadth of St. Vincent. This is not Animal Farm where some animals are more equal than some. So when we are putting these measures into place, it is for every single Vincentian. Every single Vincentian must feel safer in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and by extension, visitors alike. I think I will end on that note.
Thank you, Chieftain. Is everyone okay in our audience tonight? I just want to do a check. Yes? Yes? All right, good. Just making sure you're still with us. One area that is often neglected when talking about crime, especially in St. Vincent, is the medical and psychological effects it has on our people. But our next presentation will be done by Dr. Malcolm Grant, who has over 30 years of service in medicine. And tonight he will address the medical effects of crime. Please welcome Dr. Grant.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank, I consider it an honor and a privilege to be invited to be part of this esteemed table. Pleasant good evening to everyone. And I'd like to say that I've found that a lot of people have a false sense of security in that you talk to them about crime. I talk to my patients and, Doc, what are you worrying about? You're a member of a gang, you deal in drugs, you're involved in a tumultuous relationship, and no to those three. So, well, I mean, you don't have anything to worry about. But unfortunately, crime impacts all of us, whether or not we realize it, or not. But and I want to look at it from a medical point of view. I find that over the last year, an increasing number of people are coming to my office with insomnia. And when you try to pry below the complaint to find out, well, what is probably causing it? A lot of them, they're sleeping in a very hot room because they have the windows pulled up. They have a fan, yes, going, but there's little circulation of air. So they're basically breathing in stale air. They're getting up ever so often to check to see if there is, anybody attempting to break in. They, whenever the neighbor's dogs bark, they're similarly following up. And all this contributes to a poor night's sleep. You go to work the next day, poor concentration, reduced productivity, an increased release of stress hormones. And stress hormones, adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol, you have a persistently elevated level of these hormones, and it increases your chances of high blood pressure, diabetes, stroke, heart attacks, cancers, okay, and a whole host of other diseases. Yes, and obviously mental health issues. We have depression, we have anxiety, um, and it's a vicious cycle. So it's not, and we think of crime as being just between the person committing it and the victim. But there's a lot of what I call collateral um, damage in terms of psychological impact, physical impact on others within the society. Because quite often you wonder if you could be the next victim. You know, I remember my going out with my youngest son. He was going to take up a job in Mustique last December, and we went out the last weekend in November. And we were in a little strip there, Lanos. I turned to him and I said, "You realize, Liam, that only a quarter of St. Vincent's murders are actually solved. So there is a realistic possibility around this bar, you have one or two of these guys having a good time. You don't commit a murder and go home and maybe initially, but that is not a permanent state." And I said, "Do you realize that while they're here, somebody else is probably looking for them? And that person, if they find them, I mean, we could be victims incidentally, collaterally." So, and I thought about it. I said, you know something, maybe it's not wise to go out every 2 weeks. Maybe I go out every 2 months. So there's a negative and significant impact on the economy. If there's less sales, less money circulating, less VAT collected, government revenues will be down. So crime has to be, it is in everyone's interest. And I think we have to get the business community to buy in, the diplomatic corps, the, you know, the educators. I mean, I know this is a little beyond me, but I think that we have failed consistently our young population. Major Leacock was one of my teachers at grammar school, and no, I'm sure I remember Miss Alicia at the time can confirm that I was probably one of the poorest students in Spanish. It was an achievement for me when I got above 30%. No, seriously, in Spanish. But I did sciences relatively well. I did maths. I got a reasonable mark. But I was fortunate that I was judged within that spectrum. But here we judging nearly everybody using those criteria, when there are others who excel in sports, they may excel in art, they may excel in other areas. And if we can distill that sort of talent out and get, you know, try to maximize those individuals, the development of that potential talent, you would find that that individual is less likely to become a dropout, a dysfunctional individual, and is more likely to believe in themselves, and is more likely to be a contributing member to society rather than being a parasitic member of society. And I think we have to look at revamping our education system to see how we can. Educational revolution is not a it is not meant to be a catchphrase. It is meant to carry some meaning that can be translated in a way that um, individuals individuals can benefit, and by extension, the society can benefit. There I also make the point. Most of these criminals just don't wake up one morning and decide they're going to become a murderer. A lot of these individuals have been dysfunctional for years, from late primary school, early secondary school. But what system do we have in place to rehabilitate them? Zilch, okay? We haven't had a psychiatrist practicing in St. Vincent for a few years now, okay? And if a lot of these individuals, I mean, okay, you read the headlines. Grandmother throws 1-year-old over balcony. That is not a normal mind. And I'm sure she just didn't wake up one day and they found out that her mind was abnormal. Okay, she obviously had some sort of mental illness going on for some time. It was probably not identified, not treated. Man slits, sorry, man slits nephew's throat, 1-year-old nephew's throat. Again, that is not normal. We're looking at someone who is um, obviously has some other type of mental illness. I see a sad story about 4 months ago. Police shot mentally ill man, killed, because obviously he probably wasn't on his proper meds. He wasn't being properly treated, and as a result, he may have become violent. Yeah, the police like sleep, shot him. So I'm saying these are things that it is a whole set of issues that we need to address. And it's not a matter, you hear people say, oh, bring back hanging, bring back. I mean, that's addressing the issue after the fact. We have to see how we can tackle it from a very primary level. And, if we don't, it's going to be getting from bad to worse. And St. Vincent is, I mean, you go to a country, like, you decide you're going on a Central American country, Colombia. You Google, you see, look at various things, statistics, crime, etc. When people Google us, we are in the top 5 in the world per capita for murder rate. That's not something that I never dreamt in my wildest of dreams that I would live to see a sentence in this sort of situation. Definitely not. Okay. And if we take the longer, and the other thing that I want to point out, okay, you have two people in a fight. One pushes a knife into the other and they die. You can make that connection. It's easy. Cause and effect, easy. But I stress you out continuously by allowing the primary not winning the day for years. And you end up dying from stroke, heart attack, cancer, sepsis, because stress affects your immune system's ability to fight infection. So you end up dying from the cumulative stress that crime has caused. And it is the same end result, that it's a little bit more difficult to prove. But these are not things that I'm speaking about in an abstract way. These are actually things, there's studies that have been done in the United States who show that people who live in crime intense neighborhoods are much more likely to die prematurely. Okay, their life expect, even though they're not dying as a result of somebody shooting or stabbing them, but because of the stress associated with living in that area, on average, 5 to 10 years less is their life expectancy than somebody who lives in a neighborhood that's free of crime. And not trying to mention domestic violence, but I came across a very sad case a couple months ago where this lady said her partner broke her leg. She ended up in the hospital. And I didn't realize there's no halfway house in St. Vincent for someone like that to go after she was discharged. She said after discharge, she had to come back home and live with the same guy who broke her leg a couple weeks before that. These are things that we need to look at. I mean, we have quite a few service clubs operating in St. Vincent. And maybe we could get them to see how they can sponsorship and such. We have the Mustique Trust, other things. These folks, there's a lot of money for us as Vincentians, but for wealthy individuals, it's not a lot of funds that need to be invested to help with situations like that. But basically, it's a subject I feel very strongly about. I think it's a subject that we have neglected too long. And it's not unrealistic to think that, okay, we get 50 now, or, well, on average, in the mid to late 40s for the last 3 years. If we continue at this rate, in another 5 to 10 years, it would be close to double that. What are we waiting for? Okay, for some of us to, or more of us to get impacted either directly or indirectly. And we need to get past that mentality. Well, you're not involved in drugs, you're not in a gang, you're in a stable relationship, you don't have any domestic violence. Well, then you have nothing to worry about. But yes, crime does impact health and significantly. And the other thing that I also want to point out, in the US, where they have proper statistics, 10% of murders are committed by individuals who have psychotic illnesses. These are illnesses like schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, etc. I am sure that the incidence is even higher here incidence because we don't have the treatment in the first place. So this is not giving the murderers a free pass. But what I'm saying, we are beating up on them, but not realizing, not appreciating that we as a society are contributing to it by not providing the necessary services to these individuals. I would like to commend the NDP for having such, a gathering and the subject area. But I really, really hope that more comes out of it. It's just not a talk shop. And beyond, get the message out there and let us see how we can tackle this very, very, very worrying problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grant. I know I thoroughly enjoyed that, and I can tell that our audience did as well. Presenting next is the president of the Bar Association and a former senator. I want to say my friend too. I can add that in. I can do that. Zita Banuel, and she will discuss the law as it relates to crime.
Thank you, Daniel. Well, I would have liked to say good evening, but it's now good night. Good night, everyone in the audience here face to face, and good night, everyone who are listening via social media. Daniel says that I'm speaking about the law as it relates to crime. Well, that's a really wide area to speak on. But what I would like to say, though, the first thing that comes to my mind as something that I use would say that solving crime first begins with preventing crime. That's basically what it is. And Dr. Friday, I think, spoke about some aspects of that and what is required because it is so rooted in socioeconomic issues. So there begins one of the areas of which we need to sort out. What is socioeconomic issues that need to be addressed so that we can prevent major crimes. Crimes are rooted in terms of the violent crimes in St. Vincent. Dr. Malcolm talked about the headlines. I believe Chieftain spoke about the headlines. And the violent crimes that we refer to as offense against the person. Somebody stabs someone, somebody kills someone. Those are really related. You have two sets. Related mostly in drug-related type crime. And then you have those that are related in domestic violence, where Dr. Malcolm spoke about as well briefly, where usually, in most cases, maybe 95% of the times, a man commits a serious offense against a person, which is a female, whether it is assault occasioning bodily harm or it ends up being murder. Now, my response here is not to, I don't think, to address about how we go about solving crimes, but to give an idea of what happens in the court. Dr. Malcolm did say, he says a number of years now, but I'm practicing going on 12 years, and I would say for the last decade or so, there has not been a full-time psychiatrist working in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The impact of that is really substantial. What it means that, for one thing, there are delays in prosecuting matters that are related to persons who may have a mental health issue. Currently, last set of data from the police data file, last, time flies so much, it's not last year, actually at the opening of their sizes this year, 10% of inmates thereabouts suffer from some mental health issue. I can give you an example. So one time I had a matter that involved a young man, and he ended up killing his father. In the social inquiry report is usually that report before you sentence someone that you go out into the community and you want to find out more about who is before the court for sentencing, his relationship with the community, his relationship with family, and as well as any other medical issues that you want to find about this person. Now, usually before someone, well, that's the law anyway, before, if someone wants to plead guilty to murder, you must have a psychiatric report done on the person. So that was our starting point for him. Whether or not you appear to have a mental health issue, that's what the law is. Because who would go up and simply say, well, I killed a man? So you have to check to see whether or not this person is sane or has any mental issues, whether it may be depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, whatever it may be. Now, in his assessment, it was found out that he suffered from major depression at the time when he was assessed. And at the time he was assessed, he was just about 2 months incarcerated. I mean, obviously, as most of us would know, once you are arrested for murder, there's no bail that is given to you. The short time period upon which he was incarcerated or on remand, he was diagnosed with a major depression mood disorder. So that's like a red flag. Is it in 2 months only that he's been in prison, he developed this major depression? I mean, Dr. Malcolm may say whether or not that's possible, or what he indicated earlier, what was his history that was undiagnosed? So in the social inquiry report, go back to that now. Here it is that the mother is actually revealing that when he was much younger, that he had problems in school. That's also one of the characteristics of the young men in prison. Mind you, they're about between 18 to 35 years old, young men. Dropped out of school, never finished secondary school, not a factor. And that she's always had problems with him to the extent that she tried all over to get help and never got help. Broken social, social protection services. So he dropped out of school. And if you remember, we do have an education act that says that education is compulsory once under 16. And if you don't go to school, that you ought to have those truancy officers who would make sure that if you're not going to school, they investigate. So it's a social issue. Started long time that was never addressed. And here's this young man with all of the things that he come with, mental health issues, undiagnosed, whatever familial issues he's having in his family, whatever social issues he's having because he can't integrate and work well with the society, ends up out of pure anger, unrestrained anger, out of nothing else. Nothing killed his father. Out of we would say a simple dispute. To him, it was not a simple dispute. Father said something, he went away, he came back to the house, father says something almost like movie shoes, but it wasn't movie shoes as simple as that. It was a simple, or we would look at reasonably human being, a simple dispute, and he ended up killing his father. Undiagnosed. So, most often, as I would say, my disclaimer is I'm a defense attorney. Most people say, oh, she comes with a perspective to try to protect criminals. That is not the case. One maxim we must live by: innocent until proven guilty. Recently, I was one of on a panelist of two, giving a presentation at the OECS Regional Conference on criminal justice reform, and the focus was on fairness, rehabilitation, and restorative justice. We talk about obviously all of these issues happening in the community. How do we address them? How does the criminal justice system address them? There are lots of weaknesses. Dr. Friday talked about the forensic absence of forensic type evidence. That is true. Believe it or not, as I said, I'm 12 years in as a lawyer, and not at one time that I've practiced in the criminal court have I seen a reliance on simple thing as fingerprinting. Not used. You ask the question, is there a fingerprint bank? Maybe there is. Is there a mechanism upon which you can use that for repeat offenders? They're very high. We don't know. It doesn't come up in the court. There's an over-reliance on witnesses. Hence, as panelists, I think Dr. Friday or Chieftain mentioned, why it is so important to have good community relations between police, because there's a heavy reliance on eyewitnesses. And where you do not have an eyewitness, as people say, book it show, that prosecution will fail. There's nothing else tying the person to the incident. You have to have someone who's seen something, knows something to say and point out and give. And if it's identification issue, such as the person was masked, I see my prosecutor friend in the audience, he will tell you as a prosecutor how difficult that would be. If it's dark conditions, person is masked. Question goes back again to the communities. How many areas are well lit? Who pays attention to the dark areas? Whether or not we need more street lights to ensure people's safety. Because these days, you're in your home, they come after you. You can be armed with a gun, they can still kill you. You're walking on the street, they pull you over. I don't know much about the carjacking, but I know, for instance, for me personally, I drive with my windows up all the time at night and my doors are locked. I stop for nobody. Not one soul. I work in the criminal justice system, and so you have to be able to find ways of protecting yourself. Now, who comes before the court? I mentioned before, young men between the ages of 18 and 35, school dropouts. That's another thing that we don't touch on. Broken, dysfunctional families. And it's obvious, but we don't deal with it. And a lot of time, the young men who come, when you read their social inquiry report, will say, missing father. It's always there. Grow up with grandmother. Missing mother. Grows up with auntie. The young men, we have to have a focus on saving our young men in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We talk about our women, yes, all of us need saving, the young men and young women. Women, of course, as it relates to domestic abuse, because it's intimate partner violence, and how we empower them, how we make them understand how do I stand mentally strong and independent of pocket. Dr. Malcolm pointed out, which is true, of all of these years, we still do not have a home, a safe home for women. And also think about it, although we do have strong legislation in Domestic Violence Act, it is very strong. Having strong legislation in of itself does not make the community better, because what it boils down to is our mindset. So for instance, when a woman goes to the police station and the police refuse to actually say, listen, let me tell you how it goes here. You do have a matter whereby if he hits you, because of domestic violence covers physical, emotional, psychological, sexual, financial offenses. Well, it's a civil breaches, because it's actually a civil act. And so what you find is that they may say to you, this is a man and woman business, go down family court. Always the case. The officer does not deal with the criminal aspect of it to say to you, you can actually, I can do a charge against this man for assault. What actually happens that makes it more complicated is that these women are usually unemployed and really dependent on these men. And so what you find is that they are afraid to bring a criminal charge against these men, because what would happen to them? The child father can go jail, goes back again to broken social protection system, because even if it is that the state currently provides women and children with some type of what we call social welfare, it is not sufficient such that a woman can say, well, I know, where do I, in between I'm trying to find myself and have a good footing economically, where do I get work? Where do I get money for myself and my children? She doesn't. So there's a big open gap there where it is that women are not safe and women can find safe spaces. let's go back to fairness. Why does it take so long, apart from not having a psychiatrist in St. Vincent? And St. Vincent is not unique to this, yeah? In terms of criminal justice reform, St. Vincent is not unique to the fact that it takes forever, long delays for matters to go through the system. We're not unique. When I started practicing, there was only one criminal judge and one civil judge. Within the first 5 years of practice, there were then 2 criminal judges and 2 civil judges. That was supposed to help with the backlog. And it has. There are other ways that the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court trying to address all kinds of issues. We have now introduced within the civil jurisdiction case management. So it helps move the case along before it goes to judge. So it may spend, I don't know, maybe a year in a civil jurisdiction. What we don't have yet, not in St. Vincent, which will help, is a case management system in the criminal justice division. What that simply means is that rather than a judge takes up his time to try to manage that matter up to trial, they call it masters of the court. It's in high court. A notch lower than a judge will simply take that matter from the time the person is charged and the matter hits the high court and manage that up to trial. Applications, it just moves it quickly along and smoothly along. Right? Now, there is something tying that to that in terms of criminal justice reform. In April 2023, across the region, prosecutors, police, lawyers, politicians, I am not sure if the opposition attended, that was in Gaia Needham Point Declaration, Dr. Friday, how heard about that? Right. So Needham Point Declaration is actually a declaration that has been signed on to by governments about how they're going to improve the criminal justice system. And one of the declaration, the policy intervention that was mentioned is that as of April 2023, that there's a declaration that crime is a public health emergency. Crime is a public health emergency. That's the starting point for the reform and for us to take crime and solutions to crime seriously. I will sit out until the questions asked. Thank you.
Thank you, Zita. Another informative address. Our final address tonight will be done by the Vice President of the NDP, and can I say my MP, the MP for Central Kingstown, the Honorable Major Sinclair Leacock. He will be outlining the NDP's policy for crime. Give my MP some love, please. Thank you. Thank you.
Quite naturally, I hope that all Central Kingstown, supporters are like Daniel. I'll be drowning in love. Now, there is an advantage for me being the last of the speakers here this evening, in that I can say protocol established. I adopt all of the presentations that have been previously made as my own and find them without much fault. But I want to say how happy I am to be in this audience and with this distinguished panel. And I want to also acknowledge that there's a current saying, if you see something, say something. Well, the New Democratic Party has seen a problem, and we are saying and or doing something about that problem. And that's why we're gathered here this evening speaking, hopefully to the thousands who are hearing us on one or the other platform. I just want to summarize before I come to some specific proposals, and they are existing in the New Democratic Party, how I see the challenge of crime at the moment. And I start by recognizing that the family is the basic unit of society. If we accept that as a truism, that the family is the basic unit of society, then automatically, once crime and violence grows and or raises its head, we're beginning to say that there is problems within the family. And so we have to look there as a point of departure to deal with societal problems that speak to crime and to violence. So that obviously recognizes that crime is behavioral. It is something that we do, or it is things that we don't do, acts of omission and acts of commission. We do things that offend, that's right, that offend the state. And what therefore is required in that regard, for those of us who are charged with shaping public policy, is to, without unnecessary fanfare, pragmatically wrap our hands on the genesis, the beginning of the problem, and follow through naturally to rational conclusions. Let me take one or two of the submissions that we have listened to this evening before, which I agree. Zita mentioned it, Malcolm mentioned it, Dr. Malcolm, and other colleagues. Grand sorry. And I've said this to Bert on our radio programs. When a guy is involved in criminal activity or you hear homicide, a number of things comes back to the society immediately. It's long time he gave in trouble. That's one end of the spectrum. You also have the other end of the spectrum. Use my right hand. He never used to give anybody any trouble. So you're somewhere between long time and it's my right hand. But invariably, that individual who is suspected to be in criminal activity, you either can trace back, if you take the time, that there are problems in school, in the classroom. He used to be a good footballer, he used to be a good cricketer, he suddenly gave up the sports. He used to be regular, you don't see him with the same regularity. He or she used to be in church, they suddenly are no longer there. They were in a sports club, they suddenly are giving problems to the captain, the leader, or whoever, the manager of the team. And you're beginning to recognize behavioral decay, generally speaking. But it's nobody's problem. It's nobody's problem. The individual is left on its own because invariably, as has been indicated, the family has also long time abandoned that problem to be their problem. They have moved away from the family being the basic unit of society and with responsibility for socialization, for building value systems, and pass it on to the school. And the school say, we can't go with all and pick me there. And then the school passes it on to the church. And then the church say, this is a little bit tough for us, you know. And so we begin to kick the problem around until we reap an undesirable harvest. Now, if any of what I'm submitting as a spokesperson for crime and violence in our society, there's a word that summarizes all of that. And maybe to a phrase, but I start with a word. The word is that there is a leadership vacuum in our society. And that leadership vacuum manifests itself at the home, where we see that mothers are bringing up the children. And, you know, I don't want this to be interpreted negatively. But sometimes you see these things in your day-to-day life. From walking early in the morning, it is the woman, the young lady, who's tugging the children away to get them into school, all by herself. They're either almost always in the absence of a male figure, or sometimes they follow them up to the point of getting into the van, and they reverse it in the evening, they come back from the van to collect them. But that's not their problem. Also, they may not be working. So we see also, in very many instances, because we said there's also a challenge to the males in our society. How often, well, I have my natural bias, the mothers are almost bringing up the sons, almost all by themselves. And let me go directly. They end up to be a little bit too girly for me sometimes, you know. I hope people are not offended, because the mother kills them with love. And I'm not saying that the fathers must provide them with tough love, but I'm saying society needs the balance of mother and father, or male and female, in the bringing of our children. And too often, this abdication is the root cause of where we are today, where we have failed either to imbue the value system, bend the tree when it was young, ignore the problem, or pass it on to be someone else's problem till it becomes our problem, we, the politicians, who must address the problem. So, if there's any merit in that argument, we have to go back to basics in the society and to strengthen our families as the unit of society. What do families want? Job security. They want family harmony. They want employment opportunities. And they want, as a family, that they have the same privileges that they see others enjoying in the society. Now, there's logic to that. The society must go to great depths to prevent economic and fair opportunity for all and sundry to prosper, to self-actualize, and to be what they can be. And while we have to tread carefully between causation and the suggestion that the existence and the growth of crime and the increase of violence is as a consequence of economic circumstances, while we have to be careful with that, we must still pay attention to the details in that assessment. If you're listening and tuned in to what's happening in society, we talk about the homicides, yes. We talk about the pretty larceny, yes. But in recent times, there's been a new emerging phenomenon in the crime situation. People have been arrested. What for? A tin of this, a pack of that. Food. People are hungry, and people are starving, and people cannot provide for themselves. Dr. Friday encounters it almost on a daily basis, where people will come to this establishment just to have food supplied to them. So you've been seeing that increase. And then there is they want to wear the name brands, because I want to look like Brenton, which is kind of true. You know, because Brenton has about 12, 16 vehicles. I mean, you know, I only have 2. You know, but seriously, people want to be like everyone else. We have the other phenomena that has been emerging. Somebody mentioned it on the radio recently. Young men in the prisons know when they have completed their prison sentence. I've never seen a horse before in St. Vincent. You know. For the first time asking, keep me here a little longer, say for where I'm here, than if I go outside there. Because of what I hear has been planned inside of here, in this institution, my life out there will be far less secure than I'm in the environment of a prison. Have you seen or heard that? I mean, that's an amazing development of society. If those things are in fact happening, and we do hesitate sometimes to give labels to that, but it is a conclusion that we are not very far off, and I have come to the conclusion before already, that we are failed state, failed in many respects. The medical analysis even suggests that. that we don't have the specialists. Indeed, it's not only we don't have the specialists, but we also don't have the institutions. I had the experience on one occasion where a parent called me and asked me to get Dr. Grant, the child, admitted to the mental home. And I drove to the mental home the night with the family. And after we had gone through all of the procedural things, and I got to the door entrance where he must go in to be with the inmates, you suddenly come to realization that the mental home is worse than the prison. Because it's almost as if people are waiting to say, ah, and to grab him, and what will happen, you don't know. And I think that on that night, it is not only that the family got a temporary relief from being unable to deal with a home challenge, but you could be assured that every one of those family members went back home stressed and overstressed, because no parents likes to know that his or her child is in the prison, in the mental home, or on the streets of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And that's the domicile of far too many of our people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So let me take the circular route. It becomes again a leadership challenge. And therefore, if we want to address those kinds of problems of crime and violence in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have to, within our realities, ask a fundamental question. A fundamental question. What kind of society do we want in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? And immediately we ask that question, what kind of St. Vincent we want in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we can begin to see how our political failures have compromised that question. There are few people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines today who will dispute the fact that we are far more divided today as a nation than at the period of our grandparents and great-grandparents in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And if we are using the statistics to measure it, the crime when they were dirt poor, as they indicated, as we know, is far less than it is today. We have never had a period in St. Vincent and the Grenadines where there are so much children of the educational revolution in the prisons of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It was virtually unknown to hear a secondary school student ended up in the prison. More so, one who had come from certain family backgrounds. You know, Dr. Friday alluded earlier this evening, he alluded to it, that we have always held on to a philosophy that we proposed and took to the parliament of the social, spiritual, and redemption charter. The three big words meant a lot of things. Social, crime takes place between people, not people and animals. Yes, we have a little bit of that. But that's it, the ban will deal with that. Bestiality, so me ain't deal with that. Social is between man and man. Spiritual, or heart, or mind, or soul, or Christian beliefs, as is there in our constitution. Redemption, we have lost our way. And how do we redeem, recover, retrieve, and bring ourselves back to those normative values that means a lot in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? And if those things reasonable propositions, then we work towards that resolution. And to work to that resolution means that we have to have institutions of state that provide solutions to the problems so identified. And quite naturally, one of those institutions of state that immediate within the portfolio of crime and violence is our police force. I'm not going at individuals, but I said for what it's worth. I have not heard a commissioner of police address this nation state of ours on radio, on television, to provide us with a degree of comfort that here in this land of ours, this is not going to take place. I saw one guy, one senior officer, attempted to come forward and quite rightly saying that the criminals must not own a square inch of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I get the impression he has been silenced, but I haven't been hearing him for a little while. But if there's any merit in what I'm saying, we quite naturally will have to turn to look at what constitutes our police force. And it goes back towards there's a leadership crisis. Who runs and who is in charge of the police force? It matters to where we are with crime and violence in the Grenadines. And I will say to you, unreservedly, in a new Democratic Party government, the Commissioner of Police must put a stamp of authority on crime and violence in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. There must be that level of respect and appreciation that there's presence and that there is authority and an authority for good to ensure that the individual security in public places and spaces is not compromised at any given time. We can't be hot and cold on the issues. You can't have a crime chief saying that there is the existence of gangs. You can't have a crime chief saying that at 3 o'clock you'll be surprised to see where your children are. You can't have John Public saying that this village, this community, this street, this runs things and we stay askance, held hostage, where we can disrupt the practices. If we can bring 40 police, 40 naval members to help us in a ceremonial exercise of our independence parade, where we can bring 40 plus 40 to do the patrols in this country, the stop and search, and to send a clear signal that in our country, it's not a police state. Great respect for law and order, individual rights. But in this St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we going to have a different ethos of what constitutes St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Because I'm rational in my argument, very rational. We cannot nail it to the state of the economy, even though there's causation, because if that was so, all rich Trinidad and Tobago will not be running away with the levels of crime. Very strong economies like St. Lucia and St. Kitts would not also have escalating crime. Barbados, which is very respected, also would not have these increasing crime rates. But inside of those dynamics, where I speak to the fact that the family is the basic unit of society, there's a telling story. A too significant number of our young men and women have taken leave of our societies. They are no longer economic, social, or otherwise participants in the society. They are in their own world, their own bubble. And they are there because they believe that our societies have failed them, that there's no other way out, there's no other opportunity. And that's why sometimes I propose, and it's not yet at the stage where we have adopted this as a mantra in the New Democratic Party. Dr. Friday, your Minister of National Security to be is speaking to you. We must become a society of second opportunities, because too many of our young men and women are written off for good, permanently, because they failed the first time, the second time, and maybe a third. And you know, and I know, and especially among our women, there is that need for a fourth, fifth, and sixth opportunity until they could grasp that rope and pull themselves up to where they should be and could be. I see Kenny, Dr. Grant, you could call case because this is a political statement. That's my campaign manager. Because we are politicians. We live in a society that many people feel redemption shafts is one of the crime centers. The people in redemption shafts will tell you that it's not them, it's the people who come in. If I go to Lago Heights and I say I want to build a bridge between Lago Heights and Shafts, they will say, no, we don't want a bridge because they can come over. Don't build any. But when we are in our communities, the kinds of information we could have that are contributing to societal failures is interesting. But more important than that is the constant provision of information that tells and says to us, I want to be somebody. I want to be a better person. I want to report to a place of work. I want to have a family and I want to succeed in life. Who's listening? Who is listening? Oftentimes, it's an opposition conversation. Oftentimes, those people who are making that request for progress recognizes that I am where I am. I am feeling where because the state has turned its back on me. And they withdraw, and they withdraw. And invariably, they are also often leaders in their own right within the community. And they get their own sets of following at the expense of our state. So, to borrow an overused term and expression, we have to save our society. You know, I brought these big books here. I don't think my medical friend, former student many moons ago, if they add the mass, they'll know that what the numbers are. When I proposed the Social Spiritual Redemption Charter, I had looked in, my vision is not always the best. I had looked in our estimates under the contributions of government to grants. The National Youth Council, it gets $3,600 per year from the government. Well, that obviously goes back in the government pockets because we don't have a National Youth Council. The Boy Scouts Association gets $3,200 a year to do the right thing. The Girl Guides Association gets $3,200 a year also to do the right thing. The YWCA, which I don't know we have, gets $1,600. The Duke Friend Board Award Scheme, which is disappearing, they get $1,200. The National Youth Commission gets $4,000. And the National Youth Exchange, $12,000. A total of $32,000 to keep our young people on the right path, to keep them on the right side of history. The cost of running the prisons is $7.2 million. In short, they contribute about $5 to a worthy young man or woman to do the right thing, and $13,000 to $15,000 to keep them incarcerated. Now, you think there's not an economic measure in this? I brought the 2008 budget. In 2008, that figure that I just spoke to you about, that was $7 million, was just over $3 million. You see the drift? We are doubling the cost of keeping them in prison. In 2008, the contribution to the Scouts, Cadets, Boy Scouts, everybody was the same thing. We haven't given them a cent more. So we have to deal with institutional corrections in the Democratic Party. We have to deal with leadership issues. We have to strengthen the families to imbue our young men and women with the right values. And we have to provide an economy that makes it clear that it's fair and equal opportunity in the St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Our political party speaks to that. Our pillars for development and our priorities for carrying the country forward. I will not attempt tonight to overstay my welcome. But I recommend to those of you who are listening that Our party has not ever been short of addressing this as an issue. Page 8 of the manifesto, we have our spiritual redemption charter. And I think in the manifesto, you would see we outline about 2 or 3 pages of over nearly 30 firm and solid proposals that can take us out of this crime and violence situation or minimize it. In 2015, when Dr. Friday replaced Anna Musas, we revisited it. And I'll read the summary opening paragraph of our crime, national security, and justice statement. Crime is an obstacle to peace, joy, happiness, and prosperity. Our main resource is our people. And to have them constantly exposed to crime and violence instills fear, trepidation, and despair. Moreover, crime deters investment and impedes worthwhile efforts to increase growth in both the tourism and agricultural sectors of the economy, 2 of the pillars that I speak about. With the rising incidence of attacks carried out against yachtsmen and farmers, I add that, and with the constant theft of farmers' produce, I didn't see that, and livestock, there needs to be a serious and concentrated effort to stem the flow of those dastardly acts that are being committed with impunity. The ease with which the lives are destroyed by guns and knives, in many cases, as a result of the trade in illicit drugs, highlights the need for a new approach to combating crime and violence in this country. I suggest to you the initiative here taken tonight, stimulated and promoted by our indefatigable Secretary General, former Sergeant of Police, first degree and master's degree, Brenton Smith, is but a giant step in that direction. We ask all to be on board with the New Democratic Party for that change, for a better and more peaceful St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Thank you.
Barnaday Supermarket in Kingstown, serving the nation with quality service and excellent prices.